Hello there, everyone.
Hello there, everyone.
Alrighty. So welcome to part 3 of the 2-bottle wine tote by the Folk Art Factory. As I've mentioned in the past, I did pay for this pattern. If I mentioned before how much I paid, that was probably the right thing. In my head, I'm thinking either $6 or $8.95. It's actually in the description. I posted that because I remember saying it was a little more than I usually like to spend. So I'm thinking it was the $8.95 because $6 I can typically handle without a problem. The $8.95 seemed a bit much, but anyway. In the previous parts, we put together the front and back panel of the wine tote. We've got everything cut out. This is going to be the inside the lining pieces. Also that. And then this is going to be our, not binding. Maybe it is binding. Around the top. It's what we typically use in bias tape for the top binding. Yes, binding is the word I wanted. It's typically a term we use when we quilt. We put binding on. It did say to cut my binding at a bias because it's going to be going around the top, which means that it's going to need the ability to bend, shift, that sort of thing, which would be why you would cut it on the bias. I have made one of these bags before, and I did not cut my binding on the bias for that, and I did not do that again. Cutting your binding on the bias uses a lot of fabric. And I'm trying to get as much out of my fabric as I can. We have a wine club here in my neighborhood, and the wine bottle bag that I carry, people have commented on, so I am going to offer these up for sale to my wine club. And I will probably also be putting more of them on Etsy. So I wanted to, and with the stuff I ended up paying like almost $180 for all of the stuff. But I can really only make like 7 bags with it. So I have to buy some of the other things like this main exterior fabric. I only have enough to make 6 bags. So if I want to make more, because I have the snaps and the zippers and the handle webbing and the leather, I have all of those things. I have plenty of that. But also I put feet on them. That is something that is not in the pattern. I did put the feet on the bag, not in the pattern. So the last things we have to do is put together our exterior, put together our interior, and then put everything together. So that's what we're going to do in part 3. We're going to finish up this bag and get it all done. I have 2 different types of bottles, so I can show you how they fit into the bag and how this will work for you. All right, so the next thing it says to do is to put on the Fusible Fleece. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that typically I don't use Fusible Fleece. Typically I just use batting. In this case, I went with the Fusible Fleece because I want to see how it feels differently and the cost. Now the cost is about twice as expensive. So that right there, the cost is going to be something that it's going to make me say I don't want to do because of the cost. But if it makes the bag feel differently than my other bag, it may change my opinion. My concern, and I mentioned it in part 2, is this pocket. The fleece is fusible, so it's going to stick to the fabric, and I don't know if that's going to cause this pocket to be pushed to the front and make it not as usable, for lack of a better word. So that does concern me. But at this point, like I said, I want to try it. I want to see what we're doing. Now the Fusible Fleece we did not cut out at the beginning. we cut it out now that we have everything sewn up. That way we make sure that the fusible fleece is the right size. So we're going to cut a piece that is 13.5 by 11 or 10.5. 10.5? 10.5. So I'm using canvas, which frays a lot. And so you want to be careful when you're moving things around that you're not manhandling it too much. That's kind of why I like to use my board up here, because if it's just there, I'm not moving it out of my way and adjusting it all the time. All right, we're going to need our iron to be hot, which it should be because I just turned it on. And the fusible fleece is, where did I put it? It should be in this stack somewhere, right? Oops. Did I leave it up on the counter where it should be? No. All right. This is why I had everything in a box to start with, so I didn't misplace things. And oh, I left it right behind me, so it was right where I needed it to be. Right here. See? I left it right there. Yeah. All right. Gotta love Mondays, right? Unless you're watching this on a different day. But for me, it's Monday. And I'm just going to cut two pieces the same size, even though I probably should measure the other piece just to make sure, but I'm fairly confident they're going to be really close to the same size. All right, water gets moved here. That piece goes there. Book. Water constantly has to be moved. Okay, let's see here. How wide is this? This is 10, 20, 30, 40, 58. And I need 13 and 13. We'll do that. Okay, I am going to cut this 11.5 inches wide. Sorry, 10.5. I did that before when I read it. And I'm actually cutting it to 10 3/4 because I need to make some adjustments here. The edge is not straight. Did I get through it all? No. Some places I did. So cutting through 8 layers of fleece can be a little bit challenging. And honestly, we're going to be trimming this all down once it gets on the pieces. So a little bit off isn't going to kill us. Okay, now I'm going to need 2 rulers because this one is not wide enough. 13.5. See, one layer, no problem. And another piece that's 13.5. And I'm not going to have this go too far because I'm going to need it. Whoa! I am going to need this for the inside section, because we're going to have a nice piece of batting that goes between the bottles so that they don't clank together. Okay. I can't reach my longer ruler. Hold on. Okay. Let's square this up. I don't know why I'm being so careful with this, because we're just going to trim it anyway. But for some reason, I'm being a little obsessive this morning. And 10.5 inches. That's where we're going to go. Okay, so now we press, so this is fusible fleece, so it has a fusible side to it. You're going to feel it, it feels gritty. And you're going to press it on top of your, I'm doing my front piece right now, which is the piece that has a zipper. Keep in mind, if you are using a zipper that is made of plastic, you want to be very cautious around the zipper because it could melt. We are not sticking. I guess we'll start in the middle. You're supposed to start in the middle anyway. I never do. I'm weird that way. I don't know why. I've just always started on an edge and worked my way in. The directions do say start in the middle, press, and then press out. It's better for bubbles. You do that with fusible fleece, interfacing, anything you're fusing to something else. Like I said, that way you're going out. If there are any bubbles, it'll press out. And we are pressing. We are not running it back and forth. We are actually putting it down and pressing. Maybe directions, since, I really don't use this stuff very much. Place on ironing surface with fusible rough side up. Place fabric on top with right side up. Press firmly in place for approximately 10 seconds. Repeat lifting and slightly overlapping iron until all interfacing is fused. So, it's just like interfacing. I had the right idea. It's just being a little fussy. Now it says to put the interfacing or the fusible fleece down first and the fabric on top, and I did it the other way around. Not certain if that makes a difference. That may be why I'm having problems. I don't know. I'll try. Let's turn it over. When are we going to make our little X's? Maybe we'll do that next, before we put pieces together. So we have to put the X symbol on the webbing, the handle, so that it attaches nicely to the bag, because you don't want just one. I mean, we actually have two seams holding the handles in, but we also want to do the X. Could put in rivets, and I may or may not, depends on my mood. And I think it would look too busy if I put rivets in. That's why I'm leaning towards not doing it. But I love hardware. So I'm kind of thinking maybe it would be cool. And now, because I put the feet in first, the screw that holds the feet to the bag is in the batting, so you won't be able to feel it through the lining. In my bag that I'm currently using, you can actually, if you put your hand all the way into the bottom of the bag, and you can feel where the feet are. And with this bag, you're not going to be able to do that because the fusible fleece is on top of it. Also, hopefully that will hold the bag feet in place a little bit more, which should be helpful in ensuring that they don't come off. I don't have nearly as much trouble with feet. I guess if they get caught on something when you're picking them up, but typically the feet don't get a lot of wear and tear. You're not pulling the feet. Whereas other pieces of hardware, you do move around a lot and pull, and sometimes they break from the bag. And we don't want that to happen. Okay, so I have a nice, and it's stiffer now. You can see this one that doesn't have the fusible fleece is looser, so this one it has more stiffness to it. I mean, it's not so stiff it's gonna, you know, it's not so stiff that it's ridiculous, but it's going to hold its shape a little bit better. All right, so now I put the bag, fusible fleece down first. I put the bag on top of it, as they instructed me to do. Right side up. And now I am going to put this right in the middle. And again, the handles are messing with the fabric a little bit, so you've got to make sure to, since we're trying to press the fabric down to the fusible fleece, you got to make sure your handles are straight. That way your fabric is straight on the fusible fleece. There's a gentleman walking around looking at trees and stuff. I think he's from our landscape company. And I don't know if we have another new one or not. We keep going through landscape companies in my neighborhood. since we pay for it in our HOA fees, landscaping is not something we are responsible for personally. And everyone has their own preference on how you would prefer your landscape to look. When you buy into a neighborhood where landscaping is done for everyone, it can get a little hairy. Because not everybody has the same opinion. All right, we do have a big white fluffy kitty cat that's down at my feet, and I'm not certain where she's going to end up. You may have seen her because I think her paws were in the preview as I was prepping for today. I do believe her paws did come up at some point during that. So we'll just have to see what mood she's in. She's playing with batting right now. Now she's going to eat the fusible fleece bag. Don't eat the plastic, please. No plastic. All right. Now we should have this. And there we go. Since this side doesn't have a pocket or, you know, anything, well, just the pocket. It doesn't have the pocket. It's a little bit easier to move around. It likes to stay in place a little bit more. All right, and here comes the kitty cat to say hi. All right. I think what they're telling me to do is wrong. Excuse me, I need to be able to read. Thank you. Let me make sure I was reading that correctly because I was also petting a cat at the same time. It says now, at this point, I need to sew the front and back together. And then it tells me in the next paragraph to do the stitching for the handles. I believe that doing the stitching for the handles would be more difficult if these two pieces were sewn together. I believe that sewing the handles on and making the X would be better done now and then come back and put the two pieces together. And so therefore I am going to do it my way. And I'm first going to move the iron out of the way so the kitty cat doesn't burn her tail. Because although she probably won't, there's that chance that she could, and I don't want to have to deal with it. Okay, so on our bag, I need so you can see that it's popping up, and I've got to make sure and keep it straight. All right, a classic X shape. This X needs to be 3/4 of an inch. Okay. Measuring from the bottom of the top panel, make your X 1.5 inches high. So the only mark I need to make is 1.5 inches up. Everything else is going to be pretty much self-explanatory because I want to stay in a little bit from either edge, and I want to stay up a little bit from here, and I want to make an X. So I make a square, a rectangle, well, it's going to kind of be a square, and then X, X. And if you would like to mark all of that out so you know exactly where you're drawing, go for it. I know where I'm headed. I know what I'm planning to do, so I'm just going to mark that. And now again, trying to keep everybody straight. 1.5 inches from my seam. And then then 1.5 inches there. Let's go over to the sewing machine. So I do still have a universal 90 needle on here. Not necessary to have a 90, but I prefer it for these steps. So if you just, because it's going through all the webbing, that's why I want the 90. If I was just going through the canvas, I wouldn't worry about the 90. I would just use an 80. But I do want to use the 90 because of the webbing and everything else. So I'm going to keep my 1/4 inch foot on here. The exterior of the foot, so the outside of these 2 little feet that stick out, is 1/4 inch. Inside the foot is 1/8 inch. And that's where I want my top stitching to be, which is basically what this is. This is top stitching. The next thing I want is I want to increase my stitch length to 3.5. Since we are top stitching, we make the stitch length a little bit longer. And I am going to knot my stitch at the beginning, and I'm starting about 1/8 inch off the edge of my webbing. And again, keeping everything as straight as I can, the fabric straight, which fabric is better because of the fusible fleece, and then tight and straight here. So keeping everybody straight. Needle down position ending. There we go. Also on my foot, when you reach the metal, that is 1/4 inch. So I am going to go one more stitch in. And now I'm going to turn everybody around. And I'm going to stitch up to the blue line I drew. And I'm keeping the webbing, the handle, just inside the toe of my 1/4 inch piecing foot. Or 1/4 inch foot. It's not piecing at this point. Okay, I stopped at the line. We're going to turn again. And we're going to stitch straight across on the line I drew until I get 1/8 inch from the edge of the webbing, or the handle, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to go down. And I have now made my square. Now I need to make an X. So I am going to go at a 45-degree angle. And again, if you're not comfortable with this, draw yourself a line. I'm a little close. Let's get it there. And go straight across to the next corner. And then I am going across the top. I like to do this because this way I go across the top twice, and that gives me added strength. It's stitched twice at the top for the hand, so the handle stays a little bit stronger. It has more thread to get through if it wants to break. And now we're going to go down to this corner. And we're going to knot it. Now, I used brown thread on brown webbing, and you can't even see that it's there. If you want this to stand out, you can use a different colored thread. In my case, I guess I could have used, I have white available to me, but really the fabric is more of a cream color, and I don't have a polyester cream. I only have cotton cream, and cotton thread is weaker than polyester thread. Therefore, it would not really serve the purpose that I want it to. It wouldn't make a nice strong seam. So I'm just using the brown. And now I'm doing the exact same thing, keeping everybody straight. Now we X. Go back across. Now, keep in mind, if you do decide to use a contrasting thread to stand out, going across that top the second time, you really need to be cautious that you're stitching right over the stitches you made before. Otherwise, it will stand out and look like you made a mistake. Okay. And you can see the X's very plainly on the opposite side. Okay. 2 more tries at this. handles are attached. And we have our X's in the back. Oh, come on. Technology. There we go. Nope, that didn't work. There we go. So now with the right sides together, sew the front and back outers, matching up the seams as you go. Cut a 2-inch square from the 2 lower corners and box the corners to give volume. Turn the outer the right way and poke the edges out gently to make nice sharp corners. If you need a little more help with this, I have another detailed blog post for you at blah, 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 blah. All right. Now we're going to put the back and the front together. Back to the sewing machine we go. So this is easy. Right sides together. The catch is making sure you match up your edges. Oh, my pins are over on the other side. There they are. Okay. So we have these seams. We want to make sure we match them up. And pin. And do the same thing at the top. Handles like to cause issues, so do your best to make sure your handles are straight. Everybody's where they need to be. And I am going to sew all the way around all 3 sides. So I'm trying to make sure, and like I said, the important part are these seams. They must be together. Fabric can shift in other places, but where these seams are at need to be matched up. And you want the tops to be as close to each other as you can. We do have the option that they give you the option to trim them down later on. Hold on, I've got 2 magnets trying to stick together. There we go. Ooh! My white thread fell over. There we go. Make sure everybody's together. Now, does it say a special seam, or are we still just continuing with the 1/4-inch seam? It does not say to use any special seams, so 1/4-inch it is. And put our stitch length back down to standard. That way we have everybody sewing together nicely. Okay. The top of this is going to be stitched into another seam eventually, so I don't need to do a knot at the beginning. Get as close to that pin so that you keep your seams right together. If you have a walking foot, this would be a good spot to use it at. Okay, matching up seams, keeping everybody straight. Here's where my potential problem is going to come. Because I put the feet on early, and I like the fact that I did that, but now they're giving bulk underneath here, and I need to keep everybody straight and together. So I need to kind of pull the fabric over the top so that it goes where it needs to go. Are we at a 1/4 of an inch? Yeah, just about. Okay. Now we are going to be cutting out 2-inch squares in these corners to make box corners. So if we're a little off on the corners, the world will not come to an end. You will be okay. Now, I apparently did a really good job of measuring where these feet go because they're right on top of each other. So we've got all sorts of added height here. There we go. Why are you blurry? Voila. Handles. Now you can see all this fraying. Canvas does fray. If you have an overlock machine, a serger, whatever you want to call it, do the edges. As you can see, the fabric is sticking up where my feet are because I did such a great job of measuring them. They are right where they need to be. So the next thing we need to do is get rid of 2 inches square on each side. So I just take my ruler, line it up at 2 inches. Square. Same thing on this side. And it is 2 inches from the edge of the fabric, not from your stitching line. See, 2 inches. That's not quite visible. There we go. All right, now here. Ooh! Well, that's fun. Pins are all over the place. Let's see. Do I have any on my feet? I do not. All right, let's move them all over here so they are out of the way. Hopefully I will not get any caught in my feet. That out of the way. All right, so now we're going to cut these. And I cut too far. Hopefully not so far that I can't get it in the seam. Now here's the second place we're going to see if putting the feet on early causes me problems. Because here we take it We open it up. And now we are going to sew along this edge. There is a second way to do this where you just fold it out and then mark the 2-inch line. I have seen it done both ways. I have no set opinion as to which way I prefer. But so now we have that corner. And this is the one where I cut a little bit too far in. So we have to make sure that that is in our seam. So we might make this a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch just to make sure we get that. Otherwise we're going to have fraying fabric in the corners. So you can see here's where I cut it too deep. So my stitch has to be out here, even though that's going to be more than 1/4 of an inch. It has to be. Otherwise, the fabric will fray, the bag will fall apart, and that would not be good. All right, let's see if I can get over to my sewing machine without getting a million pins in my feet. And of course, a bunch of them decided to hang out by my foot pedal. So we have to get those out of the way. There's probably still a few more wandering around somewhere, but I think we're safe for the time being. Alright, I'm going to do this one that I know that I need to do it a wider seam first, so I can see how far it is. Then I'm going to duplicate that seam width on the other side. So it is actually, on my machine it's 10 centimeters. I can't remember what that is converted to regular stitch length, because my machine uses the metric system. Ooh, don't sew on the pin. If you can, try and get your seam to separate and open. If you've serged it, you obviously can't do that. But I did not serge mine, so I am going to open my seam. That way I have the smallest amount of seam thickness as I can, so it spreads out the thickness of the seam to either side of the seam. All right, come on. And again, this is only slightly wider than the 1/4 inch that it would be standard. And now I have a kitty cat coming in, and now she's probably going to want to play with all of those pins, which I don't want her to do. All right. So I opened up my seam as best I could. And now we're going to do the same thing over on this side, and we are going to make it the same 10 centimeters instead of 1/4 inch, just for consistency's sake. That way the bag sits correctly and doesn't look lopsided. Alright, let's see. Can I get this seam open? Beautiful. Wow, there's a pin all the way over there. Let's get that one picked up. So here we go. There we go. So we have our bag. Now comes the part where we turn it right side out. And when you do this, if you have a pair of children's scissors, so the blunt end where they're rounded at the end, you can use those. I typically can get away with just my fingers, but totally personal preference, because you need to get the corners poked out. So I'm poking out my corners to make sure they're nice and sharp. And to make sure that neither of those snip edges got caught in there and are coming through and going to cause problems later on. All right, so the bottom join, we did a top stitch around each side. The top one we're going to do in one fell swoop. Just getting rid of all the extra pieces of thread that are sticking out. Always happens. All right. Actually, I kind of like where the feet are. And we're able to stand. Oh, let me check the pocket. How did that come out? Oh, it works fine. Works just like a pocket, no problems. Like I said, I was afraid with the Fusible Fleece that it might cause an issue with it not being able to fit my whole hand down there or whatever. Nope, it's fine. All right, now we're going to do our top stitch around this join here. And we're going to do it all the way around in one go. So the first thing I need to do is get rid of my table, because we need to be able to use the entire arm area. And there's another pin that's all the way over there. They did just fly everywhere. Next thing we're going to do is change to our top stitch foot, which, as I've told you before, during bag making, I switch back all the time. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then I need to go to my top stitch that I have saved. And this stitch is slightly to the needle is moved slightly to the left, and it extends the stitch length to 3.5. And I am going to start close to a side seam and on the back. So I'm going to be as close to the side seam as I can get without being right on top of it, because I do want the knot to go through fabric, not through the seam. And so towards the back. So we're going to knot it. And make sure to keep your fabric pulled apart so you get a nice sharp top stitch. Keeping everything as straight as you can. Again, you kind of want to do as best you can for the seams to be separated. With the fusible fleece and the fact that I'm using canvas, it is a little harder because it's a little thicker and that seam just doesn't want to sit open as nicely. Wonderful. The exterior is now complete. We have the entire exterior of the bag ready to go. Now we need the interior. I think I do this part first. Let's see. All right. The lining doesn't have pockets, but there is a special divider built in to stop the bottles from clinking and rattling against each other. Begin by taking one piece of divider lining and attaching it to a piece of Styloville. Trim the foam backing and take the second piece of divider lining and place it right sides together with the first. The foam should be on the back and the two pieces of lining together. Excuse me. Okay. So, one piece of the lining. I need to get that bag out of the way because it is distracting. All right, and I'm going to cut the fusible fleece to the exact same size. As our lining piece. Go back with the interfacing, and now we attach the two pieces together. Now, something you might want to think about is when you do these patterns, you're like, okay, but now I need a pattern for this. I really like the fact that it's got the two sections. I want to make a bag that's bigger so I can put shoes in it. Or, you know, something along those lines. All of the techniques you learn that you have directions for can be used for larger or smaller items. So let's say you and your lady friends get together and drink Prosecco. Those come in, I mean, the standard bottles, which we'll see later, but they also come in tinier bottles, and they may get lost in this bag. You might want a bag that's smaller. What you just need to do is take all the sizes and make the inches smaller. And that way you have a smaller bag. So techniques can be used later on. So my fabric does not have a right side and a wrong side, but I am putting the two pieces of fabric together so that the fusible fleece is still on the exterior. So here we have my piece that doesn't have fusible fleece on it and my piece of fabric that does. And I am going to sew together the two short edges. And don't worry about the long edges. The long edges will get sewn in later on. I promise you. All right. I am not going to bother putting my table back on. I probably will need it shortly, but for right now. And I am going to make sure the fleece is towards the top. And I'm doing a 1/4 inch seam. No knotting, anything like that. Actually, I'm going to go this way. So my foot actually has the 1/4 inch feet on either side, so I can go from either direction. And instead of having this hang off the edge because I don't have my table on, I'm going to put it over the throat and do it this way. And now I'm going to need to turn it right side out. So here we have fusible fleece on the fabric, piece of fabric, no fusible fleece. Turn it right side out. Just that easy. And we do need to press this. And you're going to, I don't know, you probably can't tell it. Yeah, you can a little bit. You can see that the fusible fleece is keeping it hard to, is not wanting to go down where the seam is as easily as I want it, as it should. I shouldn't say that because it never does. So we're going to go where the seam is. I'm going to press it down. And again, not moving, we're pressing. Pressing, holding it down. And then we go to the other side and do the same thing. We press. Are we going to top stitch this? We do not top stitch this. All right. So now we have it right side out. Foam is in the middle. We have 2 raw edges. That is fine. It's perfectly acceptable. We're going to take 1 piece of lining fabric. So we have our lining fabric. And we're going to measure down 3/8 of an inch. And I'm using this little ruler because it actually has 1/8 inch marks on it. And you don't have to mark it. I did because it makes me happy. I prefer to do that than to try and mess with the ruler later on. And line up our center piece, so our on top. And then I am just going to put 1 pin in here. Actually, I'm probably going to put 2 in. I'm going to put 1 there and 1 here. Now, if you would like to, this would be a good spot to baste. You don't have to. I'm not going to, and it does not tell you to in the directions. But this would be a very good option as to where you would use your basting options. Because you need to, we're going to now put another piece of fabric over the top of it. So we take the lining fabric again and put it over the top. And we are going to sew all 3 of these layers together. And there's a chance that that center could shift because it's heavier and thicker. I'm going to have faith in myself that I will pull it off without a problem. And I say that with 45 minutes left in this part, and I need to get everything done. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. All right, so we're lined up at the top. We're straight along. Everybody's even. Off to the sewing machine we go. Quarter-inch seam. This, again, would be a good spot to use a walking foot. If I haven't said that on other spots, I meant to. Because I just used the word again like I've said that before, and then it dawned on me. I don't know if I did or not. But if you have a walking foot, this would be a good spot to use it. You have multiple layers, and that's what your walking foot is for, to make sure all your layers stay together. Because I don't know if you've ever noticed it before, but the fabric on the bottom, so in this case this layer, moves faster than the fabric on the top. Oops, I just sewed over my pin. I wasn't paying attention. I was more worried about keeping my fabric straight. Oh, we went over the pins safely, so that's a good thing. Not always something that happens, but in this case it worked. Okay. Sorry, I didn't take you off the sewing machine. So now we're going to press this open. And even when we press open, we always start by pressing it closed first. That warms up all of our threads and gets everybody ready for the party. And then we press open. And in this case, we're going to have multiple opens. We press our first piece of fabric open. And now I am going to flip this over and press the other side open in the same direction so that I've got my little tab. It's got the fusible fleece and the other two pieces are down here. That way it's pressed away from the center tab all the way around. And I'm not actually pressing them apart, just through the tab, and that way it's nice and loose where we want it to be. All right. Now I need a piece of our facing, which is this fabric up here. And it's going to go on top, and it does have a direction. So I need to make sure that it's directionally correct. It's a really odd word to use there, but if your fabric doesn't have a right or wrong, doesn't have a direction, it doesn't matter. In my case, it does have a direction. There's an up and a down. So I want to make sure that the up is in the up spot and the down is in the down spot. And I am going to, here, let me zoom you in here a little bit. All right, so I am going to fold my divider out of the way right now. I'm not going to be able to do this on the second part, but I can do it on this one, just to get it out of the way, because this is not getting sewn in to our seam here. So we want to make sure we get this all sewn up. There we go. Nope. All right, I'm going to move my table back because I'm going to need it this time. All right, now our 1/4 inch seams. And our seam is nice and bulky, so we want to try and just smooth it out a little bit if we can. If we can, which I don't think we're going to be able to. All right, so now we have our top facing sewn up here, and our tab is still loose. This area here, the stitch is not quite straight, so it might be useful to use a zipper foot. I did not think of that until I got to that point. Actually, it says right here to change your presser foot to a zipper one if you want. So it tells you in the directions that that's something to think about. If only I'd read that far. So we are going to press the seam on this to our canvas fabric. We want all the bulk of the seam to go to the canvas fabric. So first we want to get it warmed up. Sorry, I'm pressing my other seam flat. It's being a little challenging, so I decided to go ahead and it wanted to do it anyway. All right, there we go. Now we're going to press our canvas up, because later on we are going to actually do a top stitch around on the canvas side, just like we did on the other pieces of the exterior bag. Now, I am going to do something odd. I am going to call it a day, and then I am going to set up to do part 4 of our wine bag. Should not take 4 parts to do this bag, but apparently I've been talking too much or something. Because I don't want to have to stop in a mid-step and or start again mid-step. So I am going to say that once we get this pressed, it's being a little challenging to press, but I can do it. Okay, so we have one side of our interior complete. And again, not top stitching right now. I'm going to do that once we get the bag together. Our center flap is right here. It still has a raw edge over here, but as you can probably imagine, we're going to take these 2 pieces and put them on either side, just like we did. Then we're going to put this on the top of that, and this will become our interior. We are also going to have to cut out 2-inch squares on either side to get that and box it up so that it matches the other part, the exterior of the bag. Oh, there we go. So the exterior of the bag, we're going to need to match the bottom of this up with. So we will be putting in box corners there. And we will use the same adjusted stitch width on that box. I will need to remember to mention that again in part 4. Alrighty, thank you all so much for being with me. It's not going to probably be, well, I said that about this part. I didn't think this part would take that long. So hopefully we shouldn't have too much time to spend to get the bag completed on part 4. We're going to finish up the interior. We're going to put them together, put the binding on. Oh, we got to put the snap in there somewhere, so we got to remember to do that. But overall, there shouldn't be that much left to do, and this bag will be ready for wine. All right. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget, like, subscribe, thumbs up, follow, share. I'm forgetting something. Notifications. That's what I was forgetting. Notifications. Don't forget notifications. So you'll know when the next video is coming up. And I will see you all next time. Have a great day. I'm Carol Crafty